All right, so you want to understand what it means now that Putin signed this new, uh, more aggressive nuclear doctrine. It's November 19th of 2024, thousandth day of the war in Ukraine, and we are going to unpack this, especially with the U.S. now saying, yeah, Ukraine can hit deeper into Russia with those long-range missiles.
Yeah, the timing is not a coincidence. November 19th,
Mm.
1,000 days. Putin sending a message after that U.S. policy shift. It's calculated.
All right, so let's break down this doctrine. What's actually changed, like the big stuff?
Well, one of the biggest changes is like how Russia says they'd use nukes. Like they're saying any attack, even without nukes, could be seen as a joint attack if a nuclear power is backing it up.
Hold on, so even if no nukes hit Russia, they might nuke back if they think, like, America's helping out.
Exactly. It's about making things blurry, making the West think twice about helping Ukraine. It's a way to scare them off, maybe break up the support Ukraine's getting.
That's a bold move. I mean, is this a bluff or should we be worried?
It's hard to say for sure. But Russia's been acting and talking like they mean business. It's a gamble, but they probably think it's worth the risk.
Okay, so what else is in this doctrine? Anything else jump out at you?
Yeah, they also changed what kind of attack would make them, maybe use nukes back. Now it includes big attacks with conventional weapons like lots of missiles, drones, swarms of aircraft. So it's like they're blurring the line between regular war and nuclear war, adding even more uncertainty to the whole thing.
So even without nukes coming at them, just a really big attack could be enough. That changes things.
It really does. It widens the possibilities for things to escalate, and that's on purpose. Russia wants to keep everyone guessing, make the West hesitate.
What about Belarus? They're in this doctrine now, right? Why is that a big deal?
Yeah, now Russia's saying straight up, they'll use nukes to protect Belarus. It's a major escalation because Belarus is right next to Ukraine and several NATO countries.
So the potential battlefield just got bigger.
Way bigger. Any fighting that spills into Belarus, or even if Russia just says it's being attacked through Belarus, that's their excuse, right? That gives them, in their minds, a reason to use nukes. And that makes things way more dangerous for NATO and everyone else involved.
So let's play this out. What if Russia actually does use a nuke in Ukraine? What would NATO do?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Nobody knows for sure, but experts think NATO would hit back for sure, targeting Russian troops in Ukraine, maybe even taking out their Black Sea fleet. A strong response to show that, you don't get to use nukes and get away with it.
Taking out the Black Sea fleet, though, isn't that, like, super risky? Could start a bigger war.
Oh, it's definitely a risk, but it's a calculated one. Analysts think that crippling their navy would be a huge blow to Russia, both practically and, symbolically. It shows NATO is united and strong.
All right, so putting the military stuff aside, what happens to Russia on the world stage if they actually nuke someone?
Even if a bigger war doesn't break out, Russia's in big trouble. They'd be condemned by, everyone, even countries that have stayed out of this so far. And the economic sanctions. Forget about it. They'd be totally isolated.
So this whole projecting strength thing with the new doctrine could actually backfire and make them weaker.
Yeah, that's a real possibility. They could hurt themselves way more than they help themselves. They could mess up their global standing, make it harder to achieve their goals. It's the opposite of what they want.
And what about, the big picture? What message does this send to other countries?
That's probably the scariest part. Russia's basically saying, those rules against nukes, we don't care. And that could make other countries with nukes think, well, maybe we don't have to care either.
Yeah.
And that makes the world a much, much more dangerous place.
Whoa. That's a lot to think about.
Yeah, this doctrine is a huge deal. It changes everything.
We'll dig into what it all means in our next part.
It's easy to get lost in all the geopolitical stuff, but this new doctrine, it affects everyone, like regular people. We need to talk about that, what it means for you and me.
Yeah, let's get real. What does all this nuclear tension mean for someone like me? I'm not, a president or a general or anything.
Well, for one thing, it makes accidental escalation way more likely. And in a world with, thousands of nukes, that's terrifying.
Yeah.
We're talking about, the possibility of things going really, really bad, not just for the countries fighting, but for everyone.
So even if nobody wants to use nukes, it's easier for things to get out of control now.
Right. The more unpredictable things are, the bigger the chance of, a mistake, a miscommunication that blows up into something much worse. Remember the Cuban Missile Crisis back in '62? The world almost had a nuclear war because of, misunderstandings and misjudgments.
Yikes. Okay, let's say the worst happens, a nuke gets used. What would that even look like? Yeah.
Not good. I mean, at the point of impact, it's just total devastation. Like an inferno, blast waves that can flatten entire cities, huge loss of life, horrible injuries. And for people who survive the blast, long-term health problems. And that's just the start.
It's hard to even imagine that kind of destruction.
And then there's the fallout. Radioactive stuff spreading for, hundreds of miles, contaminating water, soil, air, and the long-term effects. More cancer, birth defects, health problems for generations. It's pretty grim.
So it's not just the initial blast, it's the stuff that stays around for years.
Yeah, Chernobyl, Fukushima, those are reminders of how long radiation can stick around. Huge areas became uninhabitable. People are still dealing with the consequences.
Okay, so that's the really scary stuff. But what about the less obvious effects of this doctrine? Things that might not be as dramatic but still affect our lives?
Well, the economy would take a huge hit. More tension, more uncertainty. That makes markets go crazy. Prices go up, trade gets messed up. Could even trigger a global recession.
So even if nobody launches a nuke, this whole standoff could still hurt us financially.
Absolutely. The world's so interconnected now, what happens in one place affects everyone. Like, think about the energy crisis in the 70s because of those conflicts in the Middle East. That's how these things work.
And it's not just the money, right? There's a mental and emotional toll, too.
Yeah, living with the threat of nuclear war is incredibly stressful. All the news, the speculation, the what-ifs, it can be exhausting, even debilitating.
It's like everywhere you look, there's something about nukes. It's hard to escape.
It really is. It's important to be aware of how much you're consuming. Take breaks from the news, do things you enjoy, spend time with people you care about, take care of your mental health.
Okay, all this talk about worst-case scenarios is making me feel kind of helpless. What can we even do about this? It's like we're just, stuck.
It's easy to feel that way, but don't give in to it. There are things we can do, individually and together.
Okay, I'm listening. What can we actually do to feel less powerless?
First, stay informed. Don't just read headlines. Learn about the issues, understand what's at stake, and talk about it. Talk to your friends, family, have real conversations, share what you know. Knowledge is power.
So put down the phone, stop doom scrolling, and actually talk to people.
Exactly. Don't let fear paralyze you. Take action. Support organizations working for disarmament. Contact your elected officials. Write letters. Even just talking to people about it is important. Every voice matters.
It's like you're saying we need to take back control. We're not helpless.
Right. We might not be in charge of countries, but we can still make a difference. Remember, public pressure helped get those nuclear test ban treaties signed.
That's actually kind of encouraging. So step one, understand the issue, then we can start making a difference. But zooming out again, what happens if Russia actually does use a nuke? Will other countries do the same? Like a domino effect?
That's a question everyone's asking, and it's a valid concern.
That domino effect. If Russia uses a nuke, do other countries, do they follow suit?
It's the big question, right? But the thing is, the world spent decades saying nukes are bad. It's not like automatic that others would jump in. It might even cause a huge backlash.
So you're saying, for most countries, actually using nukes is more trouble than it's worth?
Exactly. Think about it. You become a global pariah, you get slammed with sanctions, maybe even, military action. That's a lot to risk.
Okay, but what about those countries that are already, kind of rogue? The ones that don't care about the rules? Wouldn't they see this as an opening?
It's possible. And it's something experts are watching carefully. But even for those countries, using a nuke is a huge decision. The consequences are still enormous.
No, it's a balancing act, right? We got to stop countries from using nukes in the first place. But if one does get used, we got to make sure it doesn't start a chain reaction.
Right. We need a strong deterrent. But we also need to, get rid of nukes, strengthen those global norms against using them.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do we actually get to a world where nukes aren't the focus? What needs to happen?
It's complicated, but there are some key things. We need to make those international treaties and agreements stronger, the ones about non-proliferation, disarmament. Get more countries to sign on, and hold the ones that break the rules accountable.
So, more diplomacy.
Diplomacy is huge. But it also takes, willingness to talk, even with countries we don't like. Building trust, easing tensions, making things less hostile, it's essential.
But right now, with all this talk about new doctrines and potential wars, that sounds, I don't know, kind of naive. Are we actually moving in the right direction?
I know it's tough right now.
Yeah.
But that just makes these efforts even more important. We can't give up or get cynical. We got to keep pushing for a world where nukes aren't seen as an option, where we solve problems through, talking and working together.
That's a great sentiment, but I think a lot of people listening are probably wondering, what can they do? It all feels so big. How can an ordinary person actually make a difference?
Like we said before, staying informed, having those conversations, that's huge. The more people understand about nukes, the more they'll support policies to reduce the risk.
So raise awareness, keep the issue in the spotlight.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there are tons of ways to do that. Support organizations fighting for disarmament, call your representatives, write letters, even just talking to your friends and family about it. It might seem small, but it all adds up. It can change public opinion, which can lead to real change in policy.
It's funny how this conversation has, broadened. We started with Putin, and now we're talking about what each of us can do. It's like zooming out to see the whole picture.
And that's what it's all about, right?
Yeah.
It might feel overwhelming, but we can make a difference. We have a voice, and we have a responsibility to use it.
Yeah, it's good to remember we're not powerless.
Right. We all have a part to play in creating a safer future.
Well, this has been an incredible deep dive. It feels like we're at a real turning point. Russia's new doctrine is a game changer, no doubt, but it's also gotten people talking about the future of nukes in a way we haven't seen in a long time.
And that's the question I'll leave you with. Now that Russia's lowered the bar for using nukes, will it embolden other countries, make the world more dangerous? Or will it be a wake-up call and push us to finally prevent a nuclear catastrophe? We don't know yet, but the choices we make now will have a huge impact on the future.
That's a lot to think about. But like you said, knowledge is power. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it helped you understand what's at stake and maybe even inspired you to get involved. Until next time, stay curious.